with the new top 25 out, Steve, I am excited for this one because probably for the first time all season. Now, I don't know if you're going to agree with me or not, but for the first time all season, the top 25, the AP is remotely, I would say 85%, which is pretty good. I'm in agreement with. Now, there might be a number shifted here and there, but they added a lot of the teams who were missing. CC, Kansas Jayhawks. So I am very excited. Before we dig into the top 25, what's your initial reactions of this week's top 25?
Well, again, I think they ignored, and you had a tweet out just before we were prepping here for the show about how 16 undefeated teams and all but 2 got in. And I'm sorry, Coastal Carolina and James Madison deserve to be in the top 25. Did they deserve to be in the top 5? No. Top 10? No. But they're undefeated. So I personally would have put them at 23 and 24.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't really put them in the top 15. I mean, I could, but that would just be more me, hey, get off my lawn kind of stuff. But overall, they did an okay job. I'm flabbergasted. If Penn State wasn't undefeated, I'm not sure I would put them in the top 20. They were terrible the other night. And I don't want to hear about playing conditions, okay? They're about an hour and a half northeast of where I live in Pittsburgh. I was up on a ladder cleaning up my gutters and putting gutters back together and stuff in that same exact rain that they were doing. And I got my work done. I didn't have a problem. Did I get wet? Sure. But, I got a little dirty. Okay. Penn State didn't get dirty in that game against Northwestern.
Steve, you need to coach Arizona State or Colorado. You need a guy to change the culture. You need a guy that's not afraid to clean out his gutters in the rain. That's what I'm talking about. That's culture changing right there. I agree with you, though, on JMU. Coastal's a little harder for me to give a nod to. They're undefeated, so based on what we've been saying, week by week, if you're undefeated, especially this far in the season, you deserve the top 25. JMU's been absolutely incredible. Moving up to the FBS this year, thinking that they were going to be a team like a UConn, and then all of a sudden they're like, hang on a minute, we got one of the best defenses in the country, and we're going to go undefeated. And not only going to undefeated, we're going to beat decent teams like Appalachian State. We're going to give you a run for your money. I'm excited to see JMU. As you know, both of these teams are in the Sun Belt, and I'm a pretty big fan of the Sun Belt. I'm not excited to see both of these teams play Old Dominion this year because they both play. So I'm not excited for that one by any means. I can definitely give a nod to JMU. I think JMU belongs in the top 25. Coastal, if I had to, again, I would give the nod just because of what we talked about earlier. But if I got a vote, I think I might just leave them out just one more week because the wins they have aren't as impressive as JMU's. Now, again, 5-0, but Georgia State, Georgia Southern is pretty impressive because what they did in Nebraska. The other ones, not so much. All right, let's look at this top 5 here. As we saw a change at the top in the number 1. Georgia moves down to number 2. Alabama jumps them. Ohio State, number 3. Michigan, number 4. Clemson, 5. I'm okay with Georgia being number 2 because they almost lost that football game against Missouri. They were damn close of losing. Do I think Alabama deserves the 1 spot? I think it could have been a toss-up between Bama and Ohio State. I think Georgia should probably be number 3 in the country after that loss because we have seen some beatings from Ohio State, and then Alabama's took care of Arkansas quite well. So if I'm actually looking at this, I would have not been shocked if Georgia jumped all the way to 3. But regardless, 1, 2, 3, no matter how you look at them, those 3 teams are shoo-ins in my mind for the college football playoffs as we sit right now. Now, go ahead. What you got?
I was going to say, no, I agree. I was going to go down to 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. And again, this is nitpicky again. There's not going to be 2 teams from the Big Ten in the college football playoff. So when you're ranking these teams, I really think you have to factor that into the equation. Is it fair to Michigan? Maybe not. But unless Michigan beats Ohio State, they're not going to the playoff. So Clemson, who we were just talking about, on Saturday, nobody seems to give them any credit or pay any attention. And I mean, I thought they were going to lose. I have to admit, I thought they were going to lose. They took care of business. They're the number 4 team in the country.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking at it right now, what 4 teams are going to make the playoff? Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. If you assume that Ohio State beats Michigan in the Big Ten championship based on rankings. Yeah, Clemson, I think, deserves spot, not even just over the fact that Michigan, or there's not going to be 2 Big Ten teams in the playoffs. But if you look at the wins, Clemson has 2 impressive top 25 wins. One was a top 10 win against NC State just this past weekend. And that was an impressive win. They really took care of Leary, even though you had a really great song about Leary on Saturday. They took care of him, and Clemson looked good. DJ is really, the last 2 weeks, a lot of people have to apologize to DJ after what they said about him this offseason, because he has really turned it around. But yeah, I agree. I think you could move these pieces around any which way or form that you wanted to, but the 5 teams that remain on this slide would remain the same.
Yes.
All right, let's look at the next ones here. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Starting off with USC, Oklahoma State, Tennessee, Ole Miss number 9 after their win against Kentucky, and then Penn State at 10. I already heard you talk about Penn State, where you're not too thrilled about them. Your thoughts on Penn State there. USC at 6. I'm not too upset with that one. I think that their close win last week might deserve them to go down a spot, because I think Oklahoma State deserves that 6th spot over USC in my mind, just because of that tough win over Baylor. What's your thoughts on this top, or 6 through 10?
6 through 9, I'm totally right up and down the line. I think USC is the 6th best team in the country. I don't know that they're good enough to sneak into the top 5 we were just talking about. But Penn State at 10, I had Kansas at number 10. Personally, I thought Kansas has proven itself that, I know that's a huge jump, and we can't move team to play up that much. Oh, no. That's not what we do. They're the 10th best team in the country. So I think they should leapfrog Penn State, and Penn State stays in the conversation only because they're undefeated.
Okay. I'm not mad at that. As someone who has completely jumped on the Kansas Jayhawk bandwagon this year, not mad at that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just so happy that Kansas is finally in the 25, which we're going to get to in a minute. I like the USC talk. I think they are a good football team. I'm just really impressed at what Oklahoma State has done so far this year. I know we talked about that. I know on Saturday we both thought Baylor was going to win that football game because we thought that Baylor was getting disrespected. Oklahoma proved that they are just the better football team. And I would not be shocked if we were talking about the Pokes being the Big 12 champions after this season.
I can't dispute that. I absolutely agree. 100%. I agree with that.
All right, let's look at the next ones, 11 through 15. Utah taking the 11 spot. They lost the first game against Florida in the season, and then just find a way to get better week after week. I like where they sit at 11. Oregon coming back from dropping out of the top 25 after their huge loss to Georgia, and then making their way back up. Same kind of concept as Utah. Kentucky dropping to 13 after their tough loss to Ole Miss. NC State at 14 after their loss to Clemson, and Wake Forest moves back to 15 after a tough win against a once unbeaten Florida State. What do you think about these 5 teams right here? I like Utah and Oregon. I think that's a really nice step up. Good for the Pac-12. I think Kentucky could have dropped a little farther. I'm happy with NC State and Wake Forest, but your thoughts overall?
What other Pac-12 team has not been mentioned yet in the top 15?
Oh, I mean,
the undefeated.
Oh, UCLA.
Again, they're undefeated. Until they get beat, and I'm sure they're going to find a way to beat themselves, or they're going to look up in the stands and see how, and just get so crestfallen to see how nobody comes out to watch them play, that they're going to come out and just play flat and not have a good week. But I'm sorry, I dropped Penn State to 11. I had UCLA as 12. Utah, Wake Forest, Oregon would round it out my top 15. But at UCLA, you can't have Utah and Oregon ahead of them. Are they better football teams than UCLA? On paper, they are. Are they undefeated, Utah and Oregon? They're not. UCLA is. So I'd have to put UCLA up there in front of Utah and Oregon. But
right. Yeah, I'm with you. If it was a top 25 for attendance, though, UCLA would never be mentioned. This is awful. Did you look at the Rose Bowl attendance last week? It was 47% filled. Capacity is 88,000. And don't get me wrong, that's a lot. That's a lot of people for the fill the Rose Bowl. So if it was not 100%, that's fine. but they only had 41,000 people in attendance for a school as big as UCLA. And I feel like that number's, I think that number's even messed with a little bit too. I don't think there was 41,000 people there.
No, I'm sure there were 41,000 people at some point. I'm not sure they all paid admission to get in there. And I guarantee you, because I watched the end of the game, there weren't 41,000 people in the stands at the end of the game. And that was a really good game. So it's sad. It really is.
Right.
I mean, does the Big Ten really want UCLA? Or is USC insisting, look, we want them to ride our coattails into the Big Ten? I don't know. But right now, none of that matters. They're undefeated, and they should be a top 15 football program.
Going to be a really good matchup next week when UCLA takes on Utah. As I said, Utah just keeps getting better and better week by week after that loss. It's something they did last year. I think that's going to be a really good football game. I'm excited for that one. That'll definitely be on one of our shows, either Friday or Saturday, to talk about for sure. All right, here we go. Finish up top 20. BYU at 16. TCU undefeated at 17, 18. We got 3 unbeatens in a row. 17 TCU, 18 UCLA, 19 Kansas. Look at that. And then I think this is like the best shade of all. They put 19 Kansas in front of number 20 Kansas State, who was ranked last week when Kansas wasn't. So I think that was the AP cowards finally did it. They did what they needed to do. I like seeing these teams in the top 25, seeing teams like this that you normally see. Kansas beating their drought, the longest drought in Power 5 as an unranked team. Illinois now holds that, which they did receive some AP votes. I think they received 6. So that would put them, I think, roughly like 30, 31. So there's a possibility we could see that breaking the drought as well in the future this year. But what's your thoughts on these 5 teams?
Well, I would have had Syracuse in here again, another Power 5 team that's undefeated. So you need to give them some love. I would have dropped BYU back quite a bit. I think BYU has not played up to the usual standards there. And something that I just looked down at my list and I forgot, I actually had TCU number 10. Yeah, because actually I had Kansas 11, Penn State 12, UCLA 13 is how I had it. Then Utah and Wake Forest. But again, I have old man bifocals. I have to make sure that I focus a little better. No, I actually put TCU number 10. Yeah, but I have no problem putting Kansas 10 and TCU 11.
Yeah, let's do that just for the sake of because since I'm riding the train, let's do that. BYU with that win over Utah State last week. They beat Wyoming. They lost to Oregon. And they beat Baylor. I'm starting to wonder if Baylor can win a top-ranked football team. Now, maybe the disrespect was real because we have seen that. Yeah, the loss from BYU against Oregon, I think, was a big deal. And I think that's maybe shows why they might not be deserving that high. I can get on board with saying that BYU should be lower. And let's round out the last of the top 25 here. Washington at 21, Syracuse 22, Mississippi State 23, Cincinnati finds the top 25 again at 24, and Brian Kelly's LSU comes in at 25. Initially, right off the bat, happy to see the Orangemen in the top 25. I know you want them a little higher. I think they should be higher too, but hey, they're in it. They're in the ball game. That's good to hear. LSU at 25. I have a little bit of an issue with this, although they are one blocked kick away from being an undefeated team. But the way they started last week against Auburn, yes, they came back. Fantastic. That's good. But the way they came back, or the way that they were down against Auburn, a tough, not tough Auburn team this year. I don't think that deserves the next week for you to sneak into the top 25. I think this was a team I would have left out and gave them one more week to prove it for me.
I agree. And Cincinnati, I just don't see this. I mean, should they also receiving votes? Sure. Okay. But again, I would have had Coastal Carolina and James Madison. I actually would have had Coastal Carolina ahead of James Madison. I think down the road, I think offensively, they'll be able to sustain an undefeated run a little bit longer than James Madison will. But I would have had Maryland in here. I had Washington at 20, but I mean, Mississippi State, I was really happy to see them in this position here in the last 5 of the 25. But Cincinnati, I'm sorry, I don't think they've played well enough to be considered a top 25 team. And LSU, again, show me one more time Brian Kelly, and then okay, then we'll let you in.
Yeah, I don't agree with Cincinnati either. I mean, they just beat a Tulsa team who's also lost to Wyoming this year, who lost to Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss is a good loss, but Cincinnati doesn't really have the resume. I think they fell out of the top 25 at the beginning of the year because we knew that Cincinnati was not going to be the same team. They might battle for the American, sure, but they're not the same team they were in years past. They're in more of a kind of a building up phase. They're young. This is a young year for them. And I think we both were aware of that coming into this season. I don't see Cincinnati lasting too long in this AP top 25 whatsoever. I could see them falling out. Maybe not next week, but the week after that. I'm pretty sure they play a ranked team in 2 weeks. And I think they play SMU as well pretty soon. So I don't know if they'll be able to hold up with that one. I could see them falling out. LSU, I think, will find their way to make up in the rankings. I think Brian Kelly's got that team figured out. I just didn't like the way they started off that game against Auburn.